The glorious Endurance hovered silently above Crick 3, a jungle world infamous for its perilous terrain and lethal wildlife. Captain Sarah Walker stood on the bridge, her eyes scanning the viewscreen. The planet's thick canopy of trees, hiding countless dangers beneath, seemed eerily calm in the soft light of the distant star. But peace was fleeting. "Captain, we've just received a transmission," came the voice of Lieutenant Shara Lee, the communications officer. Her voice carried a hint of tension, her fingers flying over the console. "It's from the Zyrax." Sarah's stomach tightened at the mention of the reptilian race. The Zyrax were known for their cruelty, their advanced technology, and a contemptuous arrogance that bordered on dangerous. Their mocking attitude towards humanity had always been a sore spot, but now, things were escalating. "Put it through," Sarah ordered, stepping forward. The screen flickered, then stabilized, revealing a tall, imposing figure, General Zilkar, leader of the Zyrax military. His reptilian face was a mix of scales and sharp angles, his eyes cold and calculating. "Captain Walker," Zilkar's voice was rich with disdain, "it has come to our attention that your species has developed a quaint obsession with predators." "How cute! But tell me, have you ever wondered how your so-called apex creatures compare to the real predators of the galaxy?" Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her composure. "We're not interested in your games, Zilkar." "Oh, but I insist," the Zyrax general continued, a cruel smile forming. "We propose a challenge. Your strongest predators against ours. A test of survival. If your creatures prove worthy, we will release your colonists unharmed. If not, well, your people will be disposed of, and your species will forever be relegated to the annals of history as another failed experiment." The message cut off abruptly, leaving a silence that seemed to stretch. Sarah stood still, processing the words. She turned slowly toward her crew. "This is insane," Wainwright, the ship's biologist, muttered. His normally composed demeanor was shaken. "We don't stand a chance. The Zyrax have monsters, cybernetic beasts, genetically engineered killing machines. Our lions and sharks won't even make it past the first round." "Then we fight, Wainwright," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "We're not going to let them wipe us out. We'll show them what humanity is made of." "Captain," Lieutenant Lee spoke up, "what are we going to do? Their creatures are beyond anything we've ever seen. This is a death sentence for anyone who steps onto that planet." Sarah's gaze hardened. "We'll pick the strongest Earth predators we've got. Lions, sharks, wolves, whatever we can get our hands on. If they want to fight, we'll give them one. If we're going to die, we die fighting." A heavy silence followed her words, but it was not one of hesitation. It was the calm before the storm. Choosing the predators. The crew gathered in the conference room to discuss the plan. Sarah paced back and forth, her mind racing through the options. "We'll need to choose carefully," Wainwright said. "Each animal must be suited to the terrain and the creatures we might face. Lions are strong, but they won't fare well against something with armor or advanced technology. Sharks, for all their power, can't survive in the dense jungle. We need something versatile." "And wolves?" Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. "Resourceful," Wainwright replied, "but not enough to compete against a predator that's been specifically designed for combat." Sarah stopped pacing and faced her team. "We need animals that represent Earth's strength, pure and unyielding. Lions for their raw power, wolves for their cunning, sharks for their ferocity in the water." "I still think we're going to lose," Lieutenant Lee muttered. Sarah ignored her. "I don't care what the Zyrax think of us. We'll fight on our terms, not theirs. Prepare the animals. We leave within the hour." The first round, the lion versus the dragon hawk. The arena was set, a vast expanse of alien landscape with jagged rocks, thick vegetation, and pools of acidic water. The Zyrax sat in an elevated platform, their cold, unblinking eyes trained on the humans. They watched with amusement as the lion was released into the center. Sarah's heart raced as she observed the scene through a view screen. "Come on," she whispered under her breath. "Show them." The Zyrax released their first beast, a hybrid of dragon and hawk, its body bristling with sharp metallic spines, its wings unfolding to reveal a span wider than a starship. The lion crouched low, its muscles coiling as it prepared to spring. The moment the hybrid creature took flight, the lion's instincts kicked in. It leapt towards the beast with a powerful roar. For a brief moment, it seemed as if the battle might be winnable, the lion's sheer force, its primal energy, pressing against the enemy. But the dragon hawk was too quick. With a vicious strike, it slashed at the lion, sending it tumbling to the ground. Sarah clenched her fists, her heart sinking as the lion struggled to rise. The dragon hawk descended, raking its claws across the lion's chest. The creature howled in pain before falling still. "We were right," Wainwright said quietly, his voice almost mournful. "Our animals can't compete." The Zyrax roared in laughter, mocking the humans. "Is that the best you can do, Earthlings? Your strongest creature is as weak as the rest." Sarah gritted her teeth. "This isn't over." The second round, the wolf versus the jungle panther. Next, the wolf was unleashed. It darted into the arena, its senses sharp, eyes flicking from side to side as it surveyed the terrain. It was an intelligent creature, capable of assessing its surroundings, but it was no match for the Zyrax's next monster, a jungle panther, a sleek, fast predator with razor-sharp claws and an uncanny ability to blend into its environment. The wolf circled cautiously, but the panther's speed was overwhelming. It launched from the shadows, catching the wolf off guard. The wolf fought back valiantly, but the panther's agility outmatched its every move. In the end, the panther sunk its claws deep into the wolf's neck, and it fell lifeless to the ground. "Another failure," Wainwright said softly, his voice hollow. "We can't win this way." Sarah exhaled sharply, her hands clenched into fists. She could feel the weight of the stakes pressing down on her. The Zyrax were toying with them, mocking Earth's strength. "We need something different," she muttered. "Then what?" Lieutenant Lee asked. "What do we have left?" Sarah looked at the remaining option, the one no one wanted to consider. "We have the honey badger." The room fell silent. Even Wainwright raised an eyebrow. "Are you serious?" Wainwright asked, his voice skeptical. "Yes," Sarah replied, her tone hardening. "We need to fight fire with fire. It's not about size. It's about ferocity. The honey badger doesn't know when to quit." The command deck of the Glorious Endurance was eerily quiet. Sarah Walker stood near the tactical console, staring at the screen displaying Crick 3's jungle terrain, her mind racing. The Zyrax had already humiliated Earth's predators. Lions, wolves, and sharks had all failed, their corpses sprawled across the alien arena. It was as if the Zyrax were testing her resolve, pushing her to make a decision she didn't want to face. "Sarah," Lieutenant Lee's voice broke through her thoughts. "I've prepped the honey badger. Are you sure about this?" Sarah turned slowly. The sharpness in Lee's tone was palpable, yet it wasn't the first time the question had been raised. The honey badger was Earth's wildcard, small, often underestimated, and notoriously unyielding. Some of the crew had even argued that it wasn't worth the risk, but Sarah couldn't back down now. "Yes," she said firmly, locking eyes with Lee. "It's the only chance we've got left. Release it." The lieutenant hesitated but nodded, stepping to the controls. On the screen, the honey badger's containment unit opened, and the small creature scurried into the preparation zone, its beady eyes darting around, unfazed by the unfolding chaos. The arena beckons. The Zyrax platform loomed overhead, a cluster of dark shapes gazing down at the arena. The once muted atmosphere of the contest had shifted. There was now a dangerous tension in the air. The Zyrax had lost their amusement, replaced by something much darker, fear. They didn't understand what Sarah was about to unleash, but there was a palpable unease about the creature that had been chosen. Sarah watched through the viewing window. The honey badger, small, unassuming, with fur that seemed to bristle with silent anger, stood at the center of the battlefield. Across from it, the Zyrax released their first beast, a towering, cybernetic werewolf, a nightmare of metal and muscle. The werewolf's yellow eyes glinted with malice as it paced around the perimeter, its claws clanging against the metal floor. It was massive, the size of a rhinoceros, and unlike anything the honey badger had ever encountered. The contrast between the two animals couldn't have been more extreme. One, a tiny creature known for its sheer aggression. The other, a towering monster designed for warfare. "Do you really think this is going to end differently?" General Zilkar's voice echoed through the communications line, his tone thick with disdain. "This will be your final humiliation, Earthling." Sarah didn't respond. Instead, her eyes fixed on the honey badger, whose movements were calm, almost methodical. Despite the werewolf's looming presence, the badger was unfazed. It didn't cower or shrink back. It simply watched, assessing, waiting for the right moment to strike. The battle begins. The moment the signal was given, the werewolf lunged. It was a blur of movement, an unstoppable force that barreled toward the honey badger with terrifying speed. But the badger didn't flinch. It didn't even move until the werewolf was within striking distance. Then, in an instant, the honey badger was gone, vanishing into the underbrush, its small body darting with lightning speed. The werewolf skidded to a stop, confusion flickering in its eyes as it tried to reorient itself. "What the hell?" Lee whispered, her breath catching. The Zyrax watched with equal parts curiosity and annoyance. They expected this to be over in seconds, a quick kill to satisfy their amusement. But the honey badger was anything but predictable. The werewolf snarled, its massive jaws snapping as it pivoted. But before it could strike again, the honey badger emerged from the shadows. It launched itself at the werewolf's flank, clawing and biting with savage precision. The werewolf howled in pain, shaking its body violently, trying to shake off the tiny attacker. Sarah clenched her fists, watching the battle unfold. The werewolf swung its massive paw, slamming the honey badger into the dirt. The small creature's body crumpled with the impact, but in seconds it was back on its feet, an unstoppable force of nature. "How is it still standing?" Lee asked, eyes wide. The honey badger, despite the brutal hits, refused to give up. It charged once more, this time aiming for the werewolf's exposed throat. The badger clamped its jaws around the werewolf's neck, tearing through the mechanical armor with the force of its bite. The werewolf roared, attempting to throw the badger off, but it was too late. With a sickening crack, the werewolf collapsed, its throat torn open by the tiny creature's relentless assault. The arena fell silent, save for the soft rustle of the badger's fur as it stood over its fallen foe. Zyrax's shock and awe. Sarah couldn't believe her eyes. The werewolf, the creature they believed to be unstoppable, was dead. The honey badger stood triumphant, its small body heaving as it caught its breath. It was battered, bruised, but victorious. General Zilkar's voice crackled through the calms again, this time tinged with disbelief. "Impossible! How did it?" But the humans weren't listening. Their silence was broken only by the murmurs of awe that rippled through the crew. "Get ready for the next one," Sarah said, her voice low but resolute. Wainwright was staring at the screen, his eyes wide in shock. This is insane. I didn't think it would be capable of this." Sarah's lips curled into a faint smile, though her eyes remained cold. "This is what happens when you underestimate us. It's not about size. It's about heart." Lee looked at Sarah, her expression a mix of disbelief and admiration. "The Zyrax thought they could break us. They didn't even know what they were dealing with." The badger, seemingly uninterested in the attention, turned and sniffed the air, its instincts sharp, already preparing for whatever came next. The second round, the insected beast. The Zyrax responded quickly, releasing their next contender, a massive, insected creature, bristling with spikes and a thick, armored exoskeleton. It was a nightmare of chitin and muscle, towering over the honey badger. The Zyrax were clearly taking no chances now. They sent the most dangerous thing they had. As the creature skittered into the arena, Sarah's expression hardened. The honey badger was still panting from its fight with the werewolf, but it didn't hesitate. It lowered its body, its muscles coiling in preparation for the next attack. "You won't last against this one," Zilkar sneered. Our engineering is beyond anything you've seen. Your creature is nothing. But as the insected beast moved forward, the honey badger didn't attack immediately. It circled, observing, analyzing, knowing it needed to outsmart this new predator. In a flash, the honey badger darted toward the insected, leaping onto its back. The creature screeched, trying to dislodge the small animal, but it was no use. The honey badger found the soft underbelly and latched on, burrowing in with all its fury. Zilkar's confidence cracked. The insected creature flailed, its exoskeleton cracking as the badger tore through. Within minutes, the creature collapsed, defeated. Is there nothing this creature cannot do? Sarah muttered, a thrill of triumph rushing through her. The tension on the glorious Endurance was unbearable. Captain Sarah Walker stood with her hands gripping the railing, her eyes fixed on the view of Crick 3's jungle beneath the ship. The honey badger had defied all odds, tearing through the Zyrax's monsters with a ferocity that even the Zyrax could not have predicted. But this next fight, the final round, was different. This was their last weapon, their most powerful creation. If the honey badger could overcome this beast, it would change everything. Captain! Lieutenant Lee's voice was quiet yet urgent. The Zyrax are preparing their final creature. This one, it's bigger than anything we've faced. Their words, they're not making jokes anymore. They're serious. Sarah exhaled sharply, turning toward Lee. We knew it was coming. We're not backing down now. The arena of doom. The arena on Crick 3 had changed. The once chaotic, brutal battlefield was now silent, the air thick with anticipation. The Zyrax, their expressions no longer mocking, leaned forward, their eyes locked on the ground below. They were about to release their ultimate weapon. Prepare yourselves, came Zilkar's voice over the communication line. This will be your last test. Your honey badger is impressive, but it is nothing compared to the creature we've bred for this moment. It will break your will and your spirit. Sarah's grip on the console tightened. We'll see about that. On the view screen, a massive shadow stirred. The ground rumbled, and from the deepest depths of the arena's core emerged a creature unlike anything seen before, towering, sleek, and armored. Its body resembled a combination of a massive insect and a predatory reptile, with spiny limbs that moved with the grace of a stalking predator. The creature's scales gleamed with a dark, metallic sheen, and its eyes glowed with a cold, malevolent intelligence. The Zyrax warlord's smug expression didn't fade. This is the final test, Zilkar said. Behold the Garzak, our apex predator, engineered to obliterate anything in its path. It cannot be beaten by simple brute force or cunning alone. Sarah's heart pounded as the creature let out a low, guttural growl. It was easily 10 times the size of the honey badger, its claws sharp enough to rip through metal. The arena was its playground, and it would not hesitate to crush whatever stood in its way. She turned to Wainwright, who stood nearby, wide-eyed. Can it survive this? We've never seen anything like it, he muttered. It's a perfect predator, designed for one purpose, to hunt, to kill, and to conquer. Your badger, it's fast, but this thing will tear it apart. Sarah didn't respond. She knew what was coming. She'd seen the resilience of the honey badger. It didn't back down. Not even from impossible odds. The final test. The Zyrax released the Garzak into the arena, and the ground quaked under its weight. It surveyed the space, its reptilian eyes locking onto the honey badger, which had already moved into the center, crouched and alert. There was no hesitation in its movements. It was prepared to fight, whatever it took. Sarah watched as the creature slowly advanced, its massive legs grinding against the earth. The honey badger, in contrast, seemed small, insignificant in comparison. Yet, as the Garzak closed the distance, the badger didn't retreat. It darted forward, a blur of motion, aiming straight for the beast's vulnerable underbelly. The Garzak struck first. Its clawed foot slammed down, aiming to crush the honey badger in one swift motion. But the badger was faster. It leapt aside, narrowly avoiding the attack, its body skidding across the ground with uncanny precision. It darted back into the shadows, looking for an opening. You're watching the end of this farce, Zilkar sneered. Your creature doesn't understand its place. It's nothing but an insect compared to the Garzak. Sarah's voice was tight, but confident. It doesn't understand defeat either. Let's see how your perfect predator handles that. The Garzak roared in frustration, its massive jaws snapping in the direction of the honey badger. The creature's roar echoed across the arena, and the Zyrax audience began to murmur, their confidence unwavering. But Sarah could sense a shift in the air. The honey badger wasn't retreating. It was circling, waiting. The turning point. For a moment, it seemed as though the honey badger had met its match. The Garzak was relentless, its attacks precise and devastating. But the honey badger didn't fight on its own terms. It adapted, darting in and out, using speed and unpredictability. It was a perfect counter to the Garzak's brute force. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she watched the badger dive at the creature's face, leaping onto its head with a ferocity that left no room for hesitation. The Garzak screeched in pain as the badger clung to its face, claws digging into the creature's armor. This is it, Lee whispered, wide-eyed. It's going for the eyes. The honey badger clawed at the Garzak's eyes, its attack wild but methodical. The Garzak thrashed, its head jerking back and forth in an attempt to shake the badger loose. It bellowed in pain, but the honey badger's grip was ironclad. It wasn't giving up. Sarah stood tall, her gaze never leaving the screen. This fight isn't over. With a final, desperate roar, the Garzak's body went rigid. The badger, almost impossibly, had found its weak spot, its eye. The Garzak's heavy body collapsed, the arena shaking as the once imposing beast crumpled to the ground. The honey badger stood victorious, panting, but still upright. The Zyrax humiliated. The silence that followed was deafening. The Zyrax stood frozen, their expressions twisted with disbelief. Their greatest creation, their perfect predator, had been defeated, not by size, not by strength, but by something they had overlooked, sheer, unrelenting will. Zilkar's voice crackled through the comms, his tone now low and furious. Impossible. This cannot be. Sarah didn't wait for him to finish. She spoke to her crew, her voice full of conviction. It's over. Humanity is not to be underestimated. The Zyrax were silent, but it was clear they had nothing left to say. The honey badger, small and bloodied, stood triumphant in the center of the arena. It had done what no one thought possible. It had beaten the apex predator of the galaxy. Victory and departure. The Zyrax were forced to concede. The settlers of Crick 3 were released, their lives spared, and the Zyrax's arrogant superiority was shattered. As the glorious Endurance prepared to leave, Sarah stood on the bridge, watching the departing Zyrax ships with a quiet smile. They thought they could break us, he said, still in disbelief. But we showed them who we really are. Sarah's eyes never left the view screen. The honey badger proved what we've always known. It's not about size or technology. It's about heart, and humanity has plenty of that. The ship's engines hummed to life, and as they soared away from Crick 3, Sarah knew that this victory would echo through the galaxy. The Zyrax might have been the galaxy's predators, but now, they had learned a valuable lesson: never underestimate the creatures of Earth. And never, ever, underestimate humanity.